Think Tank is made possible by Amgen, recipient of the Presidential National Medal of Technology. Amgen, helping cancer patients through cellular and molecular biology, improving lives today and bringing hope for tomorrow. Additional funding is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Lined and Harry Bradley Foundation.
Hello, I'm Ben Wattenberg. The 1996 Atlanta Olympics are finally upon us. You know, the founding motto of the modern Olympics is not to win, but to take part. Really? Do Americans live up to that principle? Sport seems to be more popular than ever, but is the drive to win and to cash in spoiling the joy and opportunity to take part? Joining us to sort through the conflict and consensus are Tom McMillen, former college All-American, Olympian, and professional basketball player, and author of Out of Bounds, How the American Sports Establishment is Being Driven by Greed and Hypocrisy and What Needs to Be Done About It. Richard Lapchick, director of the Center for the Study of Sport in Society and editor of Sport in Society, Equal Opportunity or Business as Usual. Wendy Hilliard, president of the Women's Sports Foundation and former international gold medalist in rhythmic gymnastics. And Drew Hyland, professor of philosophy at Trinity College, Hartford, and author of Philosophy of Sport. The topic before this house, sports versus sportsmanship, this week on Think Tank. We are taught as children that it's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game. There are critics who say America isn't practicing what it preaches and sports are in trouble. Big money has caused some of our best young athletes to quit school early or skip college altogether to go pro. Even at the Olympics, many major spectator sports are dominated by high-profile, well-paid athletes. Some athletes seem more concerned with how they look than how they play. The pressure to win at the grade and high school level is growing fierce, often driven by childish parents. That may be fine for spectators and good for the best athletes, but does it discourage those who play for pleasure? And commercialism and other factors seem to limit opportunities for women and minorities to play sports. Others don't see it that way. They say increasing leisure time has allowed more Americans to get off the bench, and some numbers seem to agree. Over the past 10 years, the number of adult and youth softball teams has grown by over 40%. Over the same period, the rates of participation in all sports has gone up almost 10% for women and 12% for children. Overall, the rate of Americans saying they participate in athletics rose 7% over the last 10 years. Sports participation seems healthy. So what is the problem? Lady and gentlemen, welcome to the only discussion in Washington that is not about whitewater. And let us go around the room, starting with you, Tom McMillen. Just a quick answer. Are sports in America healthy?
I would say if you looked at the balance sheet, Ben, the answer to that would be no. And here's how I would judge that. You have a pyramid in society. When more resources are at the top than at the bottom, you have problems in your country. If you look at America, we have very few resources at the bottom for our kids, for the disadvantaged across the board, but we certainly have plenty of resources at the top. We can build mega stadiums, pay mega salaries for athletes, but we're not doing enough at the bottom. And that's the test that I would say in terms of unhealthiness.
Okay. Drew Hyland.
It strikes me that this question is a beautiful example of Yogi Berra's old saying, it ain't like the old days and it never was. That is, I would say that sports more or less is, as it always was, a double-edged sword. Like love and marriage, it can be absolutely wonderful if it's done right, and it can also be a disaster. And what we see in sports in the country as a whole, it seems to me, is both sides of that.
Okay. Wendy Hilliard.
Well, I think the Atlanta Olympics is going to be a showcase for women's sports, and it's going to be very interesting to see. But as Tom mentioned, the lower level, the grassroots level, is still very weak. So when you say our sport's healthy, they have a lot of attention, but are the participants healthy? And our children are not healthy.
Okay, Richard Lapchick.
I think sport reflects society, and as Tom said, the disparity between the top and the bottom levels of sport is so enormous for people of color, for women, that drives me to the answer to the question that on balance it's probably unhealthy. I think that there are things we can do to change that, and many people are working toward that end.
So we have 3.5 pessimists, is that right? Rich Lapchick, have these values in America changed in recent years, or is it, as Drew Hyland seemed to suggest, it's been ever thus, that we've had this commercialism and hero worship and fierce competitiveness and so on?
I think the stakes have been raised, but I think that America itself has changed so dramatically in the past 10 years. We've seen increases in violence in our streets, or more exposure to gender violence, more exposure to the problems of drugs in our country. As individual athletes are accused of those acts, the media has tended to paint all athletes with the same brush, when the reality is that the society itself is unraveling. We do have problems in sport, but they're not unique to sport. I think that that too much attention has been paid to those individual athletes in stereotyping them, and I think that's been true as more and more black athletes have dominated our games and fit that stereotype that so many white people have of black people.
No, I definitely agree. And when you talk about stereotypes, not just for minorities, but for women, and we're talking about the image that sports has, and that's very important. When you talk about is it healthy, and what we try to do with the Women's Sports Foundation is to get the parents to get their children involved, because the thing is, historically they haven't been participating. So now you have images of wonderful female athletes, and people are now asking me, as a female athlete, to go out there and start the professional basketball league, and softball gets more popular. Are they going to fall into the same type of risk that the male athletes? And we said the first important thing is that you get your girls out there, you get people out there playing, and don't focus on the negative aspect. But as a minority and as a woman, the stereotyping in the society is very strong, and you feel it.
The thing that strikes me, however, is that when I hear, especially when I hear people talking about how the situation with sportsmanship, say, in sports is getting worse right now, whenever I hear that, I think back to, for example, my senior year in college when I graduated in 1961.
From what college?
From Princeton University, which was the last year of the notorious basketball point shaving scandals. And that was the last of a number. In the previous decade or so, there had been a number of point shaving, fixing games, that sort of thing. I would much rather have the situation that you see today with people sort of showing off more than we would like them to do when they score, or the sort of things that are pointed to that has to be stopped today than point shaving. So that's an example, I think, of what I'm talking about when I say we have to be careful that we don't think that things are sort of all of a sudden going down the tubes.
You started the show out with the goal that it's not necessary to win, but to participate. But when you put that test across this country, you realize the severe problems that we have. You know, we can mobilize state legislatures to build these beautiful stadiums, but we cannot mobilize our governments to do programs for our kids in their schools, physical education programs. There's only one state in the country that has daily PE. Our parks,
which state?
State of Illinois. Our park and recreation programs are declining. Our children are a third fatter than they were 10 years ago. You know, the sports entertainment complex in America is incentivized by people being sedentary, not people participating. They don't make money when the child is out there playing basketball.
Well, the sports equipment manufacturers do.
When I talk about the sports entertainment complex, right, I'm talking about the content side of sports and those who are distributing the content. And when you look at that element, it's a very unusual nation that's the part that's driving this lack of participation.
You know, I must tell you, I find this conversation hard to believe. I mean, I have children who are 39, 37, 35, and 12 and a half. So I've been through this on 2 different generations. And I was once a child myself, actually, and what I see now, just the evidence of your senses, first of all, in terms of women, there has been a revolution. I mean, women, when I was growing up, and even when my older children were growing up, were, in my case, almost never involved in sports, in their case, a little bit, and now it is just, it is part of growing up the way it was for boys. Are we all agreed that this has been basically a very sound change?
As far as participation, especially for women and girls, what we're trying to fight, though, is once the girls get to be around 12 or 14 years old, we don't want them to stop sports, because that's when it's most important. In our studies, if you participate in sports, of course, you have greater levels of self-esteem, which helps prevent drug abuse and unwanted pregnancies. So although our younger children are going on the soccer field, right, when they're 8 years old, girls' soccer teams, the numbers are growing, they're still dropping out at great rates when they get around 14, when they really need sports to give them lifetime skills.
They drop out more rapidly than boys do out of sports?
Oh yes, because, well, and you talk about the numbers. In high school, women are now 1 out of every 3 participate in sports, as opposed to 1 in 27 in 1971. So the numbers are great, but still the opportunities for boys are greater. The opportunities in college are still greater, even though we've done a lot of work with Title IX, and it's come a long way, and it's 23 years.
Can you explain to our viewers what Title IX is, where it comes from, what it says?
Right. Well, Title IX basically says that if you're in college as an athlete, you have to offer the same amount of opportunities, athletic opportunities to women as you do to men. And this was a ruling back 23 years ago. And I think the reason why it's been getting so much attention is because, unfortunately, we didn't really move on it very fast back in the 70s, and many of the athletes have started challenging the rules. But as a result of Title IX, there have been more opportunities. As a result, the soccer programs for women, basketball, of course, have always strong, softball. But, you know, men still get $179 million more dollars than women do in college scholarships. Okay, so there is still a long way to go. So there's still more opportunities for men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the problems with the drop-off in participation as the students grow up is the fact that so much of sports in America is driven by organized sports at the college teams and so forth. So that as you continue to grow up, the elite level becomes the focus of our attention. And if fewer kids can play on a college team, for example, than on a high school team, well, what happens to all the kids who played in high school but can't make a college team? There doesn't seem to be anything there for them, and this is especially true of women athletes. I think what would be a wonderful thing if it ever happened would be for the United States to develop a more active sports club system of the sort that you see in Europe, where folks keep on playing actively in leagues and so forth, right on into full adulthood.
Organically, where I work, we have all the younger people and all the interns who come in for the summer involved in an informal softball league, boys and girls, or young men and young women playing together, which is not something that I ever would have dreamed of when I was that age. And I think that is it's partly social, obviously, but what's wrong with that? I mean, isn't that more prevalent than ever? That's after the alleged dip.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem is in that teenage year group where kids don't make the high school team or the junior high school team and then drop out. I think there is a tendency among adults to think consciously about being physically fit to participate in leagues like you're talking about. But we see kids who think that if they didn't make the team, that their career is over, and therefore they should stop competing or playing or doing anything that would make them physically fit.
What will the Olympics do to all this? What do we know about the Olympics? Does it increase the desire to participate, or does it increase the desire to spectate?
The affirmation of the Olympics is that millions watch and few play. But that should be inverted, where millions play and few watch. And what we're doing in the symbolism of the Surgeon General's report coming out before the Olympics is to point out that stark contrast. The Olympic movement is about mobilizing people to try, to participate, not to sit on their TV set and adulate over a great athlete. Now, Atlanta, it's great for this country, it's great for the city of Atlanta, it's great for the Olympic movement, but it fundamentally brings to question, what is a society, what are we trying to accomplish from sport? And I don't think that we've truly answered that, and I don't think Atlanta will answer that.
I want to come back to that, but let's just go back. In the setup piece, we had some statistics that showed overall participation and participation among women and children has, as a rate, not as a number, has gone up substantially in the last 10 years. Now, how does that square with what you were saying that people are not participating? Are those bad numbers?
Statistics on physical inactivity are inversely different from that, where the incidence of activity has gone down over the last decade.
I mean, if more people are participating less?
It's a very interesting question. I
suspect the increase is probably the increase in participation in some kind of organized sport.
I see.
And again, I think that's, if anything, part of the problem is that more and more and more we think of involvement with sports as necessarily involvement in some kind of organized sports instead of pickup games.
Drew, again, isn't that a situation that has always existed? In the late 1950s in Texas, I covered for the San Antonio Express News, Little League, Pony League, Babe Ruth, and American Legion baseball. And we had those same problems then. There were all these stories in the magazines about how the parents are ferociously pushing their kids and they want to get them up to be pros and they want this and they're beating up on other kids. And I mean, are you all making the case that it's more prevalent now?
Well, the stakes are higher in the parents' view. If they think their child can become a multimillionaire by reaching this unattainable level, but for them seemingly attainable level, they might put a lot more pressure on their child to get there. We have parents all over the country moving from school district to school district so their kid can play in a more competitive league and get a better chance at a college scholarship, showcase their talent, and move on to the NBA. I think it's fantastic that we're going to have women's professional basketball now, but I have no doubt that that's, unless we control it somehow, going to create some of the same problems for women athletes at the college level who will begin to dream those dreams and start to let slide some of their academic
Would you be against a parent moving a child to a different school district because it had a better science curriculum?
I would not.
But you are against it?
If that was the strength of their child and that's what the child
what
wanted.
is wrong with a parent moving, suppose the kid wants to be professional athletes. Alas, about 90% of kids want to be professional athletes, but if they're serious about it, to move him into a better league where he can accomplish more?
Actually, 55% of African American high school student athletes believe they're going to play in the pros.
That's right.
1 in 10,000 is going to make it. That science student can get a degree in science at some point. That basketball player is very rarely going to make it even to the college level, let alone the pro level. So those moves are built on an illusion or a delusion, and the other is built on a real possibility.
They're better off moving to Huntsville, Alabama to be an astronaut to go to the moon. They have a better chance of it. I mean, it's delusional. I mean, you're selling a delusion. I used to do a poll when I was in Congress of young kids when they come up and to visit the Capitol. I asked them how many want to be a professional athlete, and all of them raised their hand. How many want to be an actor? They raised their hand.
Me too.
How many want to be a PBS broadcaster? No one. How want to be a congressman? No one. How many wants to be a doctor, lawyer? No one. It's a delusion, and we've created it. The pathway goes right through our school systems in this country.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask this question. What is wrong with spectating? I mean, you know, this is a free country. You got 60 channels on there. If people want to tune in the Game of the Week or ESPN or Monday Night Football or whatever it is they're watching, what on earth is wrong? Would anybody here prefer them to watch the sex and violence on the sitcoms? I mean, what do you want? Egg in your beer? I mean, this is what's wrong with kids watching sports?
We're not saying anything, or I'm not saying watching sports. It's just that they're not participating. The thing that's wrong is if you're only watching sports.
But
if
who
you're
are those
only a
kids?
spectator.
100% of the kids in Tom's congressional office raise their hand when they say they want to be professional athletes. They must have been participating. I mean, other than they really are delusional. I mean, if they don't participate. Well, listen.
One of the things that the United States has done as a rather interesting experiment in this regard is tied sports very closely to our educational systems. We organize sports largely around our educational systems until we get to the level of pro sports. We began at one point, at least, by having physical education in classroom, in school, so that we tie physical education to the classroom, which, by the way, in this Olympic year is something that the ancient Greeks emphasized very, very much. For the ancient Greeks, the two foundational aspects of education to full humanity were what they called gymnastike, physical education, and music-K, training in the arts. I mean, one of the great ironies, it seems to me, is in our country, whenever a school system gets into trouble, what are the first two things they look to cut? These two. One of the problems is we've associated sports with education, but really failed to do that well, to really see the educational significance and value in sports and to exploit it, if I can use that term, in ways that will really benefit our students, both in terms of their physical health, but also in terms of their personal development.
Let me talk about that for a bit, about just what the joy of participatory sports is. Tom and I were talking in the green room before about this, and he used a really good word that had not occurred to me, that participation is transcendental, that you really get, I guess there's even a biological root to this flow of endorphins or something like that. But people who go out and play sport, I mean, it is one of the great human experiences in my judgment. Is that what, I mean, you've all been participatory athletes, and what are we talking about? What is the essence of this rather remarkable?
Personal fulfillment. I mean, I work with kids. I have a program in New York City, and we have 8- and 9-year-old girls coming to try rhythmic gymnastics for the first time. And the fact that they can have a skill presented to them and try it on their own and be successful, it's personal fulfillment. I really do think sports really helps your confidence. It helps you achieve things. It helps you set goals. All the good things with sports, on especially when you're participating as a child. So it's a very exciting, as you said, transcendental kind of experience for kids to participate in sports. And as you get to a higher level and you're able to reach such unattainable goals, it would seem like, then it makes it even stronger.
Sports is one of those activities where your entire person is involved. Your body, your physical ability, your mental ability. You're not just sitting there thinking and God knows what's happening to your body or vice versa.
That is one of the great oxymorons of all time, dumb jock, isn't it? I mean, this is a game that requires...
Your whole self is involved.
Every one of these sports requires split-second thinking and
we love that. That's a wonderful experience, to have your whole person involved in an activity.
Richard Lapchick, you grew up in a sports family. Your father was a legendary player and coach, Joe Lapchick. How does this translate into a sort of a lifestyle of sports, both as something you enjoy and something that is the family business, in a sense, in your case as well?
Well, I had a fairly unique experience as the son of a coach. He directed me to do everything but play basketball. I wanted to be in the NBA. There was no question I was going to be in the NBA. Unfortunately, I stopped growing at age 14, and the gene pool got shuffled in the way that I didn't expect. But
how tall was your dad?
He was 6'5". He was the first great big man in basketball back in the 20s. And I'll always remember I was convinced to go to Europe in 1960 as a 14-year-old instead of staying home and working on my game, which I desperately wanted to do. And my father got me tickets to go to the Rome Olympics if I would go to Europe, so I did. And on the way, we stopped. This guy who thought about nothing but playing basketball stopped in Dachau on the way, and I began to see something different about what life had, and began to then think about what sports can do to kind of bring people back together. And I think that's one of the great joys of sports, is it's one of the few places where people who could never get together on an equal plane get together and compete with each other, whether it's Jews and Christians, or blacks and whites, or sometimes men and women. It's one of the few areas where we look at each other as equals, because we have to depend on each other.
You know, I can't help but make a point here, because we have been negative about sport. And I don't think and speaking for everybody, which I would like to say that I don't think that we're negative about sports. My negativity is the disparity in sports, the fact that there's so much at the top and not enough at the bottom, and those are the things that we're bringing into question. Not the fact that sports intrinsically is great, but I'm very positive about the feelings that you talked about, the transcendental feelings of participating. But when I look at a nation in sports, I have to evaluate it in context of how we are doing compared to other countries of the world. And when you look at when you go to Korea and you see kids exercising on the top of a roof every day, or Japanese children taking time to exercise and factories stopping to exercise, you begin to wonder that there is a different appreciation of activity in other countries than there is in this country. And maybe we ought to give some thought to it, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Richard Lapchick, Drew Highland, Wendy Hilliard, and Tom McMillen. And thank you. Please send your comments and questions to New River Media, 1150 17th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20036, or we can be reached via email at thinktv@aol.com or on the World Wide Web at www.thinktank.com. For Think Tank, I'm Ben Wattenberg.
This has been a production of BJW Incorporated in association with New River Media, which are solely responsible for its content. Think Tank is made possible by Amgen, recipient of the Presidential National Medal of Technology. Amgen, helping cancer patients through cellular and molecular biology, improving lives today and bringing hope for tomorrow. Additional funding is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Lined and Harry Bradley Foundation. To order a transcript or video cassette of this program, please call 1-800-70-THINK. It's $10 for a transcript or $29 for a video cassette plus $2.50 shipping and handling. Or send a check to Federal News Service, 620 National Press Building, Washington, D.C. 20045.